My sister Tisa is dying, and we're finally revealing the Bigfoot we protected for decades. What we've carried since 1987 has cost us marriages, peace of mind, and 37 years of silence between us. We were 12 when we found her in the Cascade foothills, wounded, hiding in a collapsed root cellar, watching us with eyes that held something no animal should possess. We brought her canned peaches. We documented 18-inch footprints. We called her the Ant. Then something else came. Something that tore her shelter apart and circled our homestead for 3 nights, while our one-armed father sat on the porch with a shotgun he couldn't properly aim. We buried the secret, never spoke of it, not once. Until 2019, when my daughter found a cedar doll in those same woods, identical to the gifts from our childhood. When Tisa and I finally went back, we discovered something impossible. Something had been keeping pieces of us for over 3 decades. And 3 days ago, it found out where I live. You can believe what I'm about to tell you, or you can't. After 37 years of silence, I've stopped caring which way people land. My sister Tisa is dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 8 months ago. She's got maybe weeks left, maybe days. The doctors stopped giving us timelines after the last scan. And she wants this recorded before she goes. She wants someone to know what we saw, what we did, what we protected. So here we are, late November 2024. I'm sitting in my living room in Ellensburg, Washington, with a digital recorder on the coffee table between us and my twin sister in the chair across from me, looking like a shadow of herself. Tisa's lost maybe 40 pounds since spring. Her cheekbones are sharp now, her wrists thin enough that I can see every tendon when she moves her hands. But her eyes are the same as they were when we were 12 years old, standing at the edge of the old-growth timber behind our family's homestead, deciding whether to follow a trail we knew we shouldn't follow. She's the one who insisted on this. I would have taken it to my grave. I still think that might have been the right choice. Start with Dad, Tisa says. Her voice is weaker than it used to be, but there's still that sharpness underneath, that impatience she's carried her whole life. People need to understand why we were out there so much that summer. She's right. Context matters. Our father was Gus Halverson, third-generation logger, born and raised in the Cascade foothills about 20 miles east of Greenwater. His father cleared timber for the railroad. His grandfather did the same before that. Our family had worked that land since before Washington was a state. We lived on 40 acres of it, mostly old-growth Douglas fir and western red cedar, with a farmhouse our great-grandfather built in 1912. In April of 1987, Dad lost his right arm in a mill accident. A cable snapped on a log loader, and the whiplash caught him just above the elbow. He was 41 years old, and everything he knew how to do required 2 hands. I remember the silence in our house after he came home from the hospital. Mom working double shifts cleaning houses in Enumclaw. Dad sitting on the porch with a bottle, staring at the trees like they'd betrayed him. The bills piling up on the kitchen table. Tisa and I were 12 that summer, old enough to understand we were losing something. The land, maybe the house, definitely whatever our father used to be before the accident. We basically raised ourselves that summer, Tisa says now, and I don't argue. It's true. Mom was gone before dawn most days, back after dark. Dad was present in body but nowhere else. So Tisa and I did what we'd always done when the house got too heavy. We went into the woods. We'd been exploring that forest since we could walk, knew every deer trail and creek crossing within a mile of the house. But that summer, we went further, past the old logging roads, past the section of blown-down timber Dad always warned us away from. We went further because something was calling us there. I'm going to say that differently because calling makes it sound mystical, and that's not what I mean. Something was leaving us gifts, deliberate, unmistakable gifts, and we wanted to know what. Tisa reaches over and puts her hand on the recorder, thin fingers trembling slightly. Tell them about the first one, she says. Tell them about the stone. I close my eyes. 37 years, and I can still see it perfectly. Smooth and gray, almost perfectly round, sitting on the stump where we always went to read, waiting for us. That stump was our place. It sat in a clearing about a quarter mile behind the house, wide enough that both of us could sit on it with our backs against each other, reading whatever paperbacks we'd picked up from the library in town. We'd been going there since we were 8 or 9. It was ordinary, safe. Until June of 1987, when it wasn't. The stone was the first thing. I found it on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were when Mom cleaned the Hendersons' place in Buckley, which meant she'd be gone until almost 8. Tisa and I had packed sandwiches and planned to spend the whole afternoon in the clearing, but when we got there, something was sitting in the exact center of the stump. A river stone. Gray, smooth, almost perfectly spherical. The kind you might find in a creek bed, tumbled by water for decades until all the edges wore away. But the nearest creek was half a mile north, and this stone was bone dry. No dirt, no moss, no sign it had been carried through the forest by an animal or rolled there by gravity. It was placed. I knew it the moment I saw it. Could have been a hiker, Tisa says now, interrupting my memory. She does this, corrects the narrative, insists on the rational explanations we tried so hard to believe back then. We thought maybe a hiker. There were no hikers, I say. We were 20 miles from the nearest trail. She doesn't argue. She knows. We took the stone home. Didn't tell our parents. 3 days later, we went back to the stump and found something else. A bundle of huckleberries, maybe 24 of them, wrapped in strips of cedar bark and tied with some kind of plant fiber. The berries were fresh, still firm. The wrapping was deliberate, almost careful. Not something an animal would do. Not something a person would do either. Not like that. That's when I got scared, Tisa admits. The stone could have been anything. But that bundle, someone made that. Someone who didn't want to be seen. We left a gift in return. It sounds foolish now, but we were 12, and the logic felt sound at the time. If something was leaving us presents, the polite thing was to reciprocate. Tisa left a hair ribbon, red satin, from a pack Mom had bought us at the dollar store. I left a piece of butterscotch candy, still in its wrapper. Both items were gone the next day. Over the following 2 weeks, the gifts continued. A bundle of wildflowers, stems wrapped in the same bark strips, a feather from a great horned owl, perfect and unbroken. And then, in late June, something that changed everything, a doll. I use that word loosely. It was maybe 6 inches long, woven from cedar fronds, with a suggestion of a head and arms and legs. No face, no features, just the shape of a thing that might have been human. It reminded me of the corn husk dolls we'd made at summer camp 2 years before, except cruder, made by hands that understood the concept but not the technique. Or hands that weren't shaped for that kind of work, Tisa says quietly. She's looking at me now with that expression she gets when she's about to say something that will make me uncomfortable. Dory, we have to tell them about following the trail, about what we found. I know we do. That's why we're here. But my hands are shaking, and I have to set down my coffee cup before I spill it. 37 years. You'd think the fear would fade after that long. It doesn't. The cedar doll changed everything. A stone could be coincidence. Berries could be an animal's cache that we stumbled across. But that doll, 6 inches of woven fronds shaped into something that was trying to be human, that was intention. That was a mind behind the hands. Tisa wanted to follow the trail immediately. That was always the difference between us. She moved toward things, I moved away. But she was persuasive, even at 12, and I was curious despite myself. So on a Thursday morning in mid-June, with our parents occupied by their separate miseries, we packed sandwiches and 2 bottles of water and told no one where we were going. We should have told someone, I say now, touching the edge of the recorder. If something had happened to us, out. Nothing was going to happen to us, Tisa interrupts. We didn't know that then, but I felt it. Something about the gifts felt safe, like whoever was leaving them wanted us to find them. I don't argue with her. She's dying, and some arguments aren't worth having anymore. We left the clearing and headed northeast, following a deer trail we'd walked dozens of times before. But instead of turning back at the old logging road like we usually did, we kept going. Past the rusted cable spools from some long-ago timber operation, past the creek crossing where we'd caught crawdads the summer before, into the section of forest our father called the blowdown, a stretch of old growth that had been flattened by a windstorm sometime in the 1950s, now a maze of fallen giants slowly rotting back into the earth. Dad had warned us away from the blowdown since we were old enough to walk. The footing was treacherous, he said. Too easy to fall through a rotted log, break an ankle, get trapped where no one could find you. But we were 12 and invincible and following a mystery, so we went anyway. The forest changed as we went deeper. I noticed it in stages. First, the bird sounds faded, then stopped entirely. The air grew heavier, damper, thick with the smell of decay and something else underneath, something organic and sharp that I couldn't identify. The light filtering through the canopy seemed dimmer, though it was barely past noon. You remember the smell, Tisa says. It's not a question. I remember. Overripe fruit, like peaches left too long in the sun. Something musky underneath, animal but not quite. And below that, a mineral edge, like wet stone or old copper. It got stronger as we walked. We almost missed the root cellar entirely. It was built into a hillside, half collapsed, the entrance partially blocked by a fallen cedar. The remnant of some homesteader's cabin from decades past. There were a few scattered through those woods, failed attempts to tame land that didn't want taming. We'd explored others before, found old bottles and rusted tools, nothing remarkable. But this one was different. This one was occupied. I saw the eyes first. They caught the dim light filtering through the gaps in the collapsed timber and reflected it back. Greenish gold, like a cat's eyes, but larger, much larger. And they were set in a face that my brain couldn't process. Too flat, too broad, with a heavy brow ridge that cast the features below into shadow. The shape behind the eyes was enormous, hunched in the darkness, absolutely still. We ran. I don't remember deciding to run. My legs just moved. Tisa was ahead of me, crashing through the underbrush, and I followed the sound of her breathing because I couldn't see anything through the tears blurring my vision. We didn't stop until we reached the logging road, and then we stood there gasping, bent over with our hands on our knees, unable to speak. We should have stayed. Away, I say now. Tisa shakes her head slowly. We were always going to go back, you know that. We had to know what she was. She's right. We went back 4 days later. Those 4 days were the longest of my childhood. Tisa and I barely spoke about what we'd seen, but we barely spoke about anything else either. We circled around it in whispers at night, lying in our shared bedroom with the lights off, trying to find words for something that didn't fit into any category we knew. It wasn't a bear, Tisa kept saying. Bears don't have faces like that. Bears don't sit in root cellars. Bears don't... I know what it wasn't, I told her. I don't know what it was. On the 4th day, Tisa came into our room with a can of peaches from the pantry. Del Monte, the kind with the syrup Mom used to pour off and save for pancakes. She held it up without explanation, and I understood immediately. That's stupid, I said. It's not stupid. The gifts, the berries, the doll, they were offerings. What if it's hungry? What if it's hurt and it can't hunt? I wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. There had been something about the way the shape was hunched in that cellar, something guarded and careful, not aggressive, defensive, hiding. We went back that afternoon. The smell hit us before we reached the blowdown, that same mix of overripe fruit and musk, stronger now that we knew what to look for. Tisa walked ahead with the peaches clutched to her chest. I followed close behind, ready to run, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The root cellar looked the same. Dark entrance, collapsed timber, no sign of movement. Tisa set the can of peaches on a flat stone about 10 feet from the opening, then backed away slowly. We waited. Nothing happened. We went home disappointed, convinced we'd imagined the whole thing. But the next morning we went back, and the can was sitting upright exactly where Tisa had left it. Empty, licked clean, the jagged edge of the opened lid folded carefully inward so no one would cut themselves reaching inside. That's when we knew, Tisa says now. Her voice has gone soft, almost reverent. That's when we understood we weren't dealing with an animal. Animals don't fold tin edges. Over the following weeks, we brought more food. Bread heels that Mom would have thrown away. Venison jerky from the stash Dad kept in the mudroom. Apples from the tree behind the house, bruised ones that wouldn't sell. Each time, we left the offerings on that flat stone and retreated to watch. She started coming out to meet us in early July. I say she because that's how we thought of her from the beginning, though we couldn't have explained why. Something about the proportions maybe, or the way she moved. She was enormous, 7 feet at least, maybe closer to 8, though she was always hunched, one arm held close to her side in a way that suggested injury. Her hair was reddish-brown, thick and matted, lighter on her chest and face. Her features were flat, heavy-browed, with eyes that tracked our movements with unmistakable intelligence. She never threatened us. She never came too close. She just watched and accepted what we brought, and sometimes, when she was feeling what I can only describe as content, she made a sound low in her chest, a humming that vibrated through the ground. We called her the aunt, Tisa's idea. Our mother's sister had died young, before we were born, a solitary woman, the family said, who lived alone in the woods near Mount Rainier and never married. We didn't remember her, but we'd seen photographs, a tall figure standing at the edge of a tree line, slightly apart from the rest of the family, watching with an expression that seemed familiar. The aunt watched us the same way, patient, waiting, alone. We were children, Tisa says now, her voice cracking. We didn't understand what we found. We just knew she needed help, and we were the only ones who could give it. July bled into August, and the aunt became the center of our world. We went to her almost every day, slipping away after breakfast with whatever food we could take without our mother noticing. Bread heels, bruised apples, once, half a jar of peanut butter that had gone grainy from sitting too long in the pantry. She ate everything we brought, though she seemed to prefer the canned fruit, peaches, pears, fruit cocktail and heavy syrup. The sugar, maybe. Or the sweetness. I don't know. What I know is that she waited for us. Every time we approached the root cellar, she'd be sitting just inside the entrance, watching the tree line. When she saw us coming, she'd make this sound, 3 quick knocks against the timber frame with her knuckles. Tisa figured out it was a greeting. I thought it was more than that. I thought it was her way of saying she recognized us, that we were safe. She had patterns, Tisa says now, leaning forward despite her exhaustion. This is the part she's been waiting to tell. Real patterns, not just instinct, intention. Dory was the one who noticed first. She's right. I was always the one who noticed. The aunt arranged things, stones in lines of 3 or 5, sticks crossed in specific ways and placed at the boundary of what seemed to be her territory. I started drawing them in a notebook I kept hidden under my mattress, the shapes she made, the configurations. Looking back now, I think she was counting, or marking time, or communicating something we didn't have the framework to understand. She made sounds, too. The triple knock was the most common, but there were others. A low hum when she was content, deep enough that I felt it in my chest before I heard it with my ears. A sharp clicking when something startled her. And once, just once, a sound that I can only describe as mournful, long and low, rising at the end. She made it while looking toward the deeper forest away from us, and I remember thinking she sounded like our mother had sounded at her sister's funeral, like grief given voice. We started documenting things that summer. Tisa's idea, though I was the one who borrowed Mom's Polaroid camera. The footprints were the most concrete evidence. We found them in the mud by the creek, 18 inches from heel to toe, with a stride length that suggested something over 7 feet tall. The photos came out grainy but clear enough. We kept them hidden in a shoebox under Tisa's bed. We collected hair samples, too. Tufts of reddish-brown fur caught on bark and branches, coarse and thick, nothing like deer or bear. And we documented the smell, that mix of overripe fruit and musk that clung to our clothes and made our mother wrinkle her nose when we came home. "You girls have been in something dead," she said once, and we just nodded and went to wash up. She didn't ask more. She never asked more. The climax of that summer, the moment I still dream about, came in late August. We'd been visiting the aunt for nearly 2 months by then. She'd grown comfortable enough to sit within arm's reach, though she never initiated contact. But that day, something was different. She seemed tired, slower than usual. Her injured side had healed, but she moved like something else was hurting, something inside that we couldn't see. I don't know what made me do it. I just reached out, slowly, the way you'd approach a nervous horse, and I touched her hand. Her skin was warm, leathery but not rough. Her fingers were twice the length of mine, with nails like thick yellow horn. She didn't pull away. She just looked at me with those eyes, greenish gold, ancient, full of something I couldn't name, and let me touch her. Tisa is crying now. She does that sometimes when we talk about this part. 2 species, she says, wiping her eyes. 2 completely different species. And for that one moment, she doesn't finish. She doesn't have to. August ended. School was starting. We didn't know it then, but we only had weeks left with her. The first week of September, everything changed. I felt it before I understood it. A shift in the forest, a new tension in the air. The birds went quiet in places they'd always been loud. The usual deer trails were empty, and the ant, who'd grown comfortable enough to sit with us for hours, started looking over her shoulder toward the deeper woods, watching, waiting. She knew something was coming, Tisa says flatly. Looking back, the signs were obvious. We just didn't know how to read them. The first sign we couldn't ignore was the tree. A Douglas fir, about 100 yards from the root cellar, its bark stripped in long vertical gouges from about 4 feet up to nearly 8. Fresh wounds, sap still running, the pale wood underneath exposed like bone. I'd seen bear markings before. Dad had shown us how to identify them, and this wasn't that. Bears rub and claw. This looked like something had gripped the trunk and torn downward, deliberately, violently. Tisa found the elk 2 days later. It was maybe a quarter mile from the ants' territory, in a small clearing we'd never explored. What was left of it? The carcass had been torn apart, not eaten, not scavenged, just destroyed. Ribs scattered, head twisted at an angle that made my stomach turn. And the smell was different from the ants' smell. Sharper, more acrid, male somehow, though I couldn't have explained why I thought that at 12. Territorial display, Tisa says now, using the clinical language she learned in her years as a veterinary technician. That's what it was, a male establishing dominance, warning others away. Warning her away, I correct. She nods, warning her away. The aunt stopped coming out to meet us. When we approached the root cellar, we could hear her inside, making sounds we'd never heard before, low and warning, almost like growling, but threaded through with something higher. Fear. I recognized it because I felt it too. We should have told someone, I say now. We should have... Told them what? Tisa interrupts. That there was a monster in the woods and another monster was hunting her. They would have thought we were crazy, or worse, they would have believed us and come out there with guns. She's right. I know she's right. But the guilt has never faded. The knowledge that we saw what was coming and did nothing, could do nothing. The last time we saw the ant before it happened, she was standing at the entrance of the root cellar, not hiding inside like she had been. She looked at us for a long moment, then made a sound I'd never heard from her, soft and low, almost like a sigh. And she turned and went back into the darkness. I think now that she was saying goodbye. We were children, Tisa says quietly. We didn't understand. No, I agree. We didn't, but I think she did. September 14th, 1987. I remember the exact date because it was a Sunday, and Mom had let us skip church that morning. She was too tired to argue, and Dad was already drunk by 9. We told her we were going to the creek. We didn't tell her we were going to check on the ant. The walk felt wrong from the start. The forest was too quiet, not the peaceful quiet of early morning, but the held breath quiet of something waiting. No birdsong, no squirrels chattering in the canopy. Even the wind had stopped, leaving the air heavy and still. I remember the smell hit us before we reached the blowdown. Not the ant smell, the other one. The sharp, acrid stench we'd been noticing for weeks, stronger now, mixed with something metallic underneath. Blood. I know that now. I didn't have a word for it then. Tisa saw it first. She stopped so suddenly I walked into her back, and when I looked past her shoulder, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The root cellar was destroyed, not damaged, destroyed. The timber framing that had stood for decades was shattered. Thick beams snapped like kindling and scattered across the clearing. The earth around the entrance was torn up, gouged in long furrows like something massive had been dragging claws through soil. We just stood there, Tisa says now. Her voice has gone flat, the way it does when she's trying to keep control. We couldn't move, couldn't process it. We found the hair in the debris, tufts of it caught on the splintered wood, some reddish brown, the color we knew, and some black, coarser than the ants, longer. The black hair was everywhere, like whatever owned it had been thrashing, fighting, tearing through the structure without care for what it destroyed. The claw marks in the remaining timber went deep. I put my finger in one of them later, when I could finally make myself move. It sank to the second knuckle and didn't touch the bottom. We searched for her. I'm not proud of how we did it, stumbling through the wreckage, calling out in whispers like our voices could somehow bring her back. We found more signs of violence, a path of broken saplings heading northeast into the deepest part of the forest, smears of something dark on the bark of trees. The smell got worse the further we went, until Tisa grabbed my arm and said we had to stop. There was no body, she says now. That's what I kept telling myself. No body means she could have gotten away. She could have run. Or she was taken, I say quietly. Tisa doesn't respond. We've had this argument before. We went home in silence. I remember Mom asking if we'd had a good time at the creek, and I remember saying yes. And I remember going to our room and lying on my bed and staring at the ceiling while something inside me cracked open. We'd lost her. Whatever the aunt was, whatever she'd meant to us, she was gone. And we couldn't tell anyone. We couldn't explain why two 12-year-old girls were grieving something that wasn't supposed to exist. That night, I heard Tisa crying in her bed across the room. I didn't say anything. I just lay there in the dark, listening to my sister mourn in secret, the way we'd done everything else that summer. We didn't know yet that the worst part wasn't over. We didn't know that whatever had destroyed the root cellar wasn't finished with our family. 3 nights later, it came to our house. The first night was Monday. I woke to the sound of Buster, our old blue tick hound, whimpering under the porch. Buster was 12 years old and half deaf, but he'd never been a coward. He'd treed bears before, baited cougars, stood his ground against anything that came near our property. But that night, he wouldn't come out. When Dad called for him, we heard the dog press himself further under the boards, his claws scraping against the dirt in panic. Then we heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving through the tree line at the edge of our property, maybe 50 yards from the house. Step, pause, step, pause, circling. I could track the sound as it moved from the north side of the clearing to the east, then south, then west. Whatever was making those footsteps was walking the entire perimeter of our land, slow and methodical, like it was measuring something or looking for something. Dad went out on the porch, Tisa says, with his shotgun, one-armed and drunk, and he went out there. He sat in the old rocking chair with the 12-gauge across his lap, the barrel resting against the arm he didn't have anymore. I watched from the window. He didn't call out or challenge whatever was in the trees. He just sat there, rocking slowly, the gun he couldn't properly aim pointed at nothing. The footsteps continued until nearly 3 a.m. Then they stopped. Buster stayed under the porch until noon the next day. The second night was worse. The smell came first, so powerful it seeped through the closed windows and filled the house. That sharp, acrid musk I'd learned to recognize in the forest, but concentrated now, overwhelming. Mom lit candles and said it must be a dead animal nearby. Dad said nothing. Tisa and I knew exactly what it was. Then came the sound. I don't know how to describe it except to say it was a vocalization, not a howl, not a scream, something in between, deep enough that I felt it in my chest before I heard it with my ears. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, rolling across the clearing and pressing against the walls of the house. Mom started praying in the kitchen. I could hear her voice, thin and desperate, reciting the Lord's Prayer over and over. I made it to the bathroom before I vomited. Tisa was right behind me. Dad stayed on the porch again that night. When I looked out the window around midnight, I saw him sitting perfectly still, the shotgun in his lap, staring into the darkness. I don't think he slept. I don't think any of us did. The third night brought silence, complete and absolute silence. No footsteps, no sounds, no smell. We almost convinced ourselves it was over. Then morning came, and we found the deer. It was laid at the edge of our property, positioned precisely where our driveway met the tree line. A doe, maybe 150 pounds. Its head had been twisted completely backward, the neck broken so severely that the skull faced the wrong direction. No bite marks, no claw wounds, just that terrible rotation, that deliberate violence. Tisa and I looked at each other and understood what our parents didn't. This wasn't the aunt. The aunt had been gentle, careful. She arranged stones and accepted peaches and made soft sounds when she was content. This was what had killed her, or driven her away. And now it was letting us know that it knew where we lived. The ranger showed up on a Thursday, late September. By then, the nights had gone quiet again, and our parents had convinced themselves, or pretended to convince themselves, that whatever had happened was over. Dad had dragged the deer carcass into the woods and buried it. Mom had stopped praying out loud, though I still heard her whispering in her bedroom at night. We didn't talk about any of it. That was the Halverson way. His name was Dale Womack, Forest Service, out of the Snoqualmie district. Tall, maybe mid-50s, with a gray mustache and the kind of patient, weathered face that suggested he'd seen a lot of strange things in 30 years of walking those woods. He drove up in a green government truck and spent a long time just standing at the edge of our property, looking at the tree line. Dad met him on the porch. I watched from the kitchen window while Mom pretended to wash dishes. "Got reports of bear activity in this area," Ranger Womack said. His voice carried in the still air. "Neighbors down the road said they heard some unusual sounds a couple weeks back. Wanted to check in, see if you folks have noticed anything." Dad shrugged with his one arm. "Haven't seen any bears." "What about sounds? Anything unusual at night?" "Coyotes, maybe. Nothing worth mentioning." I could tell Womack didn't believe him. He had a notebook out and was writing things down, his eyes moving from Dad's face to the tree line and back again. After a few more questions that Dad answered with grunts and half-truths, the ranger asked if he could look around the property. "Free country," Dad said, and went back inside. Womack spent 3 hours in those woods. Tisa and I watched from our bedroom window as he disappeared into the trees, then reappeared, then disappeared again. When he finally came back, his boots were muddy and his face had changed. Still professional, still calm, but with something underneath, something unsettled. He asked to speak with us separately. Mom tried to protest, but Womack was polite and firm. "Just routine questions," he said. "Nothing to worry about." He talked to Tisa first, out on the porch where our parents couldn't hear. When it was my turn, I sat in the rocking chair where Dad had spent those 3 terrible nights, and Womack pulled up a wooden stool across from me. "You girls spend much time in the woods back there?" "Sometimes," I said. "Not far." "Ever go past the old logging road into the blowdown section?" "Dad told us not to." Womack nodded slowly, writing something in his notebook. Then he looked up at me, and his eyes held mine longer than felt comfortable. "I found something back there," he said quietly. "A collapsed structure. Root cellar, maybe, from an old homestead. Looked like something tore it apart recently. You know anything about that?" My mouth went dry. I shook my head. "There were tracks," he continued. "Big ones. Bigger than any bear I've seen in 22 years. And claw marks in the wood that don't match anything in my field guides." He paused. "You sure you don't know anything about it?" "No, sir." He watched me for a long moment. I don't know what he saw in my face. Probably everything I was trying to hide. But finally, he just nodded and closed his notebook. Before he left, he talked to Dad one more time, away from Mom and us. I couldn't hear most of it, but I caught the end. Womack's voice had dropped low, almost confidential. "Whatever did this wasn't a bear, Mr. Halverson. I've seen bears my whole career. This was something else." He paused. "You might want to keep those girls closer to home for a while." Dad didn't respond. He just stood there on the porch, watching the ranger's truck disappear down the drive, his face empty of anything I could read. The county sheriff came by a few days later and filed a supplementary report. "Unusual large mammal disturbance. Recommended we secure our livestock. We didn't have any livestock." Then the officials stopped coming, and the silence settled back over our family like snow. Tisa pauses the recording. We've been talking for almost 3 hours, and I can see the exhaustion in her face, the way her cheeks have gone hollow, the tremor in her hands that's gotten worse since she started the new round of chemo. But there's something she wants to show, and she won't rest until it's done. "Get the box," she says. I know which box she means. I've kept it in the back of my closet for 37 years, wrapped in a plastic bag inside an old pillowcase, hidden where no one would think to look. Not my husband when we were married, not my daughter, not anyone. The shoebox is water-stained and soft at the corners. The lid doesn't fit quite right anymore. When I set it on the coffee table between us, Tisa reaches out and touches it like she's greeting an old friend. "We should show them," she says. "Show them what we have." Inside are the Polaroids. 7 of them, faded now to sepia tones. The image is soft around the edges, but still unmistakable. The first one shows the footprint in the creek mud, 18 inches from heel to toe, the toes splayed wide, the impression deep enough to suggest enormous weight. Tisa took that one in late July. You can see the quarter she placed next to it for scale. The second shows the cedar doll, the one that appeared on our reading stump. Third and fourth are more footprints, different locations, different angles. Fifth is a tuft of hair caught on bark, reddish-brown, coarse, nothing like any animal we'd ever seen. The 6th photograph makes my hands shake every time I look at it. It was an accident. Dory was trying to photograph a stick arrangement the ant had made, and her hand moved at the wrong moment. The image is blurred, unfocused, but at the edge of the frame, half hidden by a Douglas fir trunk, there's a shape, dark, massive, watching. "That's her," Tisa says quietly. "That's the only picture we ever got." There's more in the box. Photocopies of Ranger Womack's official report, which Tisa obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request in 2015. I didn't know she'd done that until she showed me the documents 3 years ago. She'd been building a case file, she said, quietly, for years. The report confirms everything. Claw marks inconsistent with known bear species. Track impressions measuring 17 to 19 inches. Structure damage suggesting significant force from large mammal of undetermined origin. And in the margin, in Womack's handwriting, "Follow up?" But he never did. The file was closed in October of 1987. Case inactive. There's one more thing in the box, something we haven't talked about yet. I see Tisa's eyes move to it, a smaller envelope, newer than the rest, tucked against the side. "Not yet," I say. "Dory, I'm not ready. Let's talk about what came after, the years between. Then we can—" I trail off. Tisa watches me for a long moment, then nods slowly. "Okay," she says. "The years between. Let's talk about how we lived with it." She reaches over and presses record again. The red light blinks on, steady as a heartbeat, waiting for the rest of our story. 32 years is a long time to keep a secret. Long enough that the secret becomes part of you, woven into the fabric of who you are so completely that you can't imagine yourself without it. Long enough that you start to wonder if it really happened at all, or if you invented it, or if you dreamed the whole thing during one long fever that lasted an entire summer. But then you smell something. Overripe fruit at a farmer's market, musk in a pet store, and your body remembers before your mind does. Your heart rate spikes. Your palms go slick. And you're 12 years old again, standing at the edge of a root cellar, looking into eyes that reflected light like a cat's but held something far more ancient. "We never talked about it," Tisa says. "Not once, not even to each other." She's right. After that September, after the ranger left and the sheriff filed his useless report and our parents settled back into their separate silences, Tisa and I made an unspoken agreement. The ant had never existed. The summer had never happened. We were just 2 normal girls from a normal family with normal problems. A father who drank too much, a mother who prayed too hard, a homestead slowly sliding toward bankruptcy. We went back to school. We made friends. We grew up. I watched Tisa leave for college in 1993, Washington State, pre-veterinary program. She'd always been good with animals, always had that calm steadiness that made frightened creatures trust her. I wonder sometimes if the ant gave her that, or if she'd always had it and the ant just recognized it. I stayed closer to home. Got my teaching certificate from Central Washington University, married a man named Hank Callahan who worked for the county road department, had a daughter we named Margot. We bought a little house in Cleellum, close enough to the old homestead that I could visit my mother when her mind started going far enough that I didn't have to see those woods every day. Dad died in '94, liver failure. Mom sold the property that same year to a timber company, and the house sat empty for a decade before it finally collapsed. I drove by it once, in 2003, and saw the roof had caved in. The forest was already reclaiming it, blackberry vines crawling up the walls, saplings pushing through the porch. I didn't stop. I didn't get out of the car. I almost told Hank once, I admit now, watching Tisa's face on the other side of the recorder. We were fighting about something. I don't even remember what. And I wanted to hurt him, wanted to say something that would make him understand why I was the way I was, why I flinched at certain sounds, why I couldn't sleep with the windows open, why I'd wake up sometimes in the middle of the night and just lie there, listening. What stopped you? I knew he'd think I was crazy, and I trail off, searching for the words. I couldn't stand the idea of him looking at me differently, wondering what else I'd lied about, what else I was hiding. My husband thought I was having an affair, Tisa says flatly. That's what ended my marriage. He was convinced I was keeping secrets from him, sneaking around, lying about where I'd been. He wasn't wrong about the secrets. He was just wrong about what they were. The silence stretches between us. Outside, I can hear a car passing on the street, a dog barking somewhere in the neighborhood, normal sounds, safe sounds. I dreamed about her, I say finally. The aunt. For 30 years, I dreamed about her. Tisa looks up sharply. You never told me that. I never told anyone. I wrap my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. Not nightmares, just dreams. Walking through the forest, following the old paths, and finding her waiting at the root cellar. She'd be sitting there the way she used to sit, hunched and patient, and she'd look at me with those eyes, and I'd feel safe, like I was home. Dory. Tisa's voice cracks. Why didn't you ever? Because I thought I was crazy. Because I thought if I said it out loud, it would mean something was wrong with me. I wipe my eyes with the back of my hand, because I didn't want to know if you had the same dreams. I didn't dream about her, Tisa says quietly, but I never stopped thinking about her, wondering if she survived, wondering if she was still out there somewhere, in the deep woods where no one goes. She pauses, wondering if she ever thought about us. We sit with that for a moment, 32 years of silence finally breaking open. Then Margot found the doll, I say. Tisa nods. Then Margot found the doll. My daughter has always loved the outdoors. She gets it from Hank's side. His family were hunters and fishermen going back generations, people who felt more comfortable in the woods than in town. Margot started hiking as soon as she could walk, and by the time she was in her 20s, she'd covered most of the trails in the Central Cascades. In spring of 2019, she decided to explore the area around the old family property. She didn't tell me she was going. Why would she? She didn't know there was anything to tell. The property had been logged in 2008. The timber company finally harvested the old growth, leaving behind a patchwork of clear cuts and replanted sections. But they'd missed some areas, left pockets of original forest standing where the terrain was too steep or the access too difficult. Margot wanted to see what remained of where her grandmother had grown up. She called me that evening, her voice strange in a way I couldn't immediately identify. Mom, I found something weird today. My stomach tightened. What kind of weird? I was hiking near where Great-Grandpa's house used to be. There's not much left, just some foundation stones and the old well. But I found this stump, maybe a quarter mile from the clearing, and there was something sitting on it. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers went white. What was it? A little doll, like made out of branches or leaves or something. Cedar, I think. It was just sitting there on the stump, like someone had placed it there on purpose. She paused. I took a picture. It's really strange, Mom. Who would leave something like that out in the middle of nowhere? I couldn't speak. The room tilted around me. Mom, are you okay? Send me the picture, I managed. Send it right now. It arrived 30 seconds later. I stared at my phone screen, at the image of a crude figure woven from cedar fronds, maybe 6 inches tall, with a suggestion of a head and arms and legs. No face, no features, just the shape of something that was trying to be human, identical to the doll that had appeared on our reading stump 32 years ago. Mom? Margot's voice was frightened now. What's wrong? You're scaring me. Where exactly did you find this? I need you to tell me exactly where. It was just off the old logging road, near a big nurse log that had fallen across the... Don't go back there. My voice came out harsh, commanding. Promise me, Margot. Promise me you won't go back there. Mom, what is going on? I hung up without answering. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial Tisa's number. We hadn't spoken in months. We'd drifted apart the way we always did, the silence between us growing until it felt insurmountable. But this couldn't wait. This changed everything. She answered on the third ring. Dory, what's wrong? She's still out there. The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other. Or something that remembers. What are you talking about? Margot found a doll, a cedar doll on a stump near the old property. Tisa, it's the same. It's exactly the same as the ones she used to make. Silence on the other end of the line, then very quietly. That's not possible. It's been 32 years. I know what I'm looking at. I know what Margot photographed. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. She kept making them, or something did, something that's still there, still waiting. Dory, we have to go back. We have to see for ourselves. I wiped my face, took a shaky breath. Will you come with me? The pause stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, when? As soon as you can get here. Another pause. I could hear her breathing, could almost hear her thinking. I'll be there Saturday, she said finally. Don't go without me. I promised I wouldn't. And for the first time in 32 years, my sister and I made plans to return to the place where everything had changed. We drove up together on a Saturday morning in late June 2019. Tisa had flown in from Spokane the night before, and we barely slept, sitting up in my kitchen until 2 a.m, talking around the thing we were about to do without ever quite talking about it directly. It was easier that way. Safer. The road to the old property had changed. The timber company had built new access routes, gravel tracks that cut through the replanted sections in straight, efficient lines. But underneath, the bones of the land were the same. I recognized the curve of the ridge where Dad used to park his truck, the shape of the valley where the creek ran down from the high country, the way the old-growth remnants stood like islands in a sea of younger trees, dark and dense and untouched. It's smaller than I remembered, Tisa said as we pulled off the road near where the house had stood. She was right. The clearing that had seemed so vast when we were children was maybe half an acre, choked with blackberry brambles and wild rose. The house was gone entirely, not just collapsed but absorbed, the forest pulling it back into itself board by board. I could see a few foundation stones poking through the undergrowth, and the old well had become a dark circle of standing water surrounded by ferns. Nothing else remained. We stood at the edge of the clearing for a long time, neither of us willing to take the first step into the trees. Margot said she found the doll near a nurse log, I finally said, off the old logging road, maybe a quarter-mile east. That's not far from where the root cellar was. I know. Tisa looked at me. Her face was thinner than it had been the last time I'd seen her. She'd been losing weight for months, though neither of us knew why yet. The diagnosis wouldn't come until the following spring. But even then, even before she knew she was dying, there was something in her eyes that suggested she understood this might be her last chance. Let's go, she said. We walked in silence, following a deer trail that might have been the same path we'd taken as children, or might have been something else entirely. The forest had grown and changed and shifted, but certain landmarks remained. A boulder shaped like a crouching bear, a cedar with a double trunk that split 10 feet off the ground, the creek crossing where the water ran shallow over smooth stones, and the smell, faint but unmistakable. Overripe fruit, musk, something mineral underneath. You smell that? Tisa whispered. I nodded. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. We found the nurse log about 20 minutes later. It was massive, an old-growth Douglas fir that must have fallen decades ago, its trunk now soft with decay and carpeted in moss. Ferns grew along its length, and saplings had taken root in the decomposing wood, reaching toward the gaps in the canopy above. One end of the log was hollow. I could see the dark opening from 30 feet away, a mouth in the rotting wood just large enough for someone to crawl inside. Dory, Tisa's voice was strange. Look. She was pointing at the ground near the hollow end. I looked down and felt the world tilt beneath my feet. Footprints, fresh ones, pressed deep into the soft earth around the log, 18 inches long, 5 toes, splayed wide. The same prints we'd photographed in the creek mud 32 years ago. She's here, I breathed. She's still here. Or something is. We approached the hollow slowly, the way you'd approach a wounded animal, hands visible, movements careful, every sense alert. The smell grew stronger as we got closer, but it wasn't the sharp, acrid smell from that terrible September. This was the other smell, the one I remembered from the summer, the one that meant the ant. I reached the opening first. I got down on my hands and knees, my heart hammering, and looked inside. The hollow was larger than it appeared from outside, maybe 4 feet wide and 6 feet deep, the interior smooth from years of decay. And it was full of objects, arranged with obvious intention along the curved walls. Rusted cans, Del Monte peaches, the labels long gone, but the shape unmistakable. At least a dozen of them, stacked in neat rows. Stones. Smooth river stones, arranged in patterns of 3 and 5, the same patterns I documented in my notebook all those years ago. A child's barrette, green plastic, tarnished almost black with age. I recognized it immediately. Tisa had been wearing it the day we first found the root cellar. She'd lost it somewhere in the forest that summer and never found it again. And a photograph. I reached into the hollow with trembling hands and pulled it out. A Polaroid, faded but still visible. 2 girls sitting on a stump, books open in their laps, heads bent close together. Summer sunlight filtering through the trees behind them. Neither of them looking at the camera. Neither of them aware the picture was being taken. Tisa and me. Summer of 1987. 12 years old and completely oblivious. We never posed for this, Tisa whispered. She'd crawled up beside me, was staring at the photograph over my shoulder. Dory, we never knew this picture existed. She took it. My voice didn't sound like my own. Or she found it somehow, and she kept it. For 32 years, she kept a picture of us. The implication settled over me like cold water. The aunt hadn't just accepted our gifts and tolerated our presence. She'd watched us from distances we never knew. She'd documented us the way we'd tried to document her. And when everything fell apart, when the root cellar was destroyed and she fled or was taken, she'd kept this. A picture of 2 girls who'd brought her peaches and touched her hand and called her by a name she'd never hear spoken aloud, something that looked almost like love. We sat beside that nurse log for nearly an hour, not speaking, not moving, just trying to absorb what we'd found. The photograph lay between us on the moss, those 2 12-year-old faces staring up at the canopy, frozen in a moment neither of us remembered. The peach cans, Tisa finally said. They're the same brand, Del Monte, the kind Mom used to buy. I know. That means she survived. Whatever happened at the root cellar, the attack, the destruction, she got away. She made it out. Or something related to her did. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph, at our young faces, our bent heads, the easy intimacy of sisters who didn't yet know how silence would grow between them. We don't know if this was her. It could have been, I don't know, offspring. Family. It's her. Tisa's voice was certain in a way mine couldn't be. The patterns, the stones arranged in 3s and 5s, that was her thing, Dory, her signature. No one else would know to do that. She was right. I knew she was right. But accepting it meant accepting something else, that the aunt had lived all these years, somewhere in these woods, keeping relics of us the way we'd kept relics of her, that the connection we'd felt as children hadn't been one-sided, that she'd remembered us the way we'd remembered her. The weight of it was almost unbearable. There's more, Tisa said quietly. She'd crawled partway into the hollow while I was lost in thought, her thin frame fitting easily into the narrow space. Now she was backing out, something cupped in her hands. Bones. Small ones, maybe from a squirrel or a rabbit, bleached white with age. But mixed in with them was something else, a single bone, larger than the others, curved in a way that made my stomach turn. That's a finger bone, I said. That's human. I know. Tisa's face had gone pale. Old, though. Look at the color, the texture. This has been here for decades, maybe longer. Tisa, I don't think she killed anyone. She said it quickly, defensively. The aunt wasn't violent. You know that. We spent an entire summer with her, and she never once threatened us. Never once showed aggression. Then how do you explain? I don't know. Maybe she found it. Maybe it was here before she started using this place. She set the bones down carefully on the moss. Or maybe there are things about her, about them, that we never understood, that we couldn't understand. I thought about the other one, the thing that had circled our house, left the deer with its head twisted backward, filled the night with sounds that made me vomit from pure animal fear. The aunt hadn't been alone in those woods. She'd been hiding from something, running from something. We should go deeper, Tisa said suddenly. What? Into the hollow. There might be more. She was already moving, her curiosity overriding her caution the way it always had. If she's been using this place for 30 years, there could be... Tisa, wait. But she was already inside, her voice echoing strangely off the rotting wood. There are marks in here, scratches on the inside of the log. Dory, come look at this. I didn't want to. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to take the photograph and the barrette and go home and never come back. But I crawled in after my sister anyway, the way I'd followed her into the blowdown all those years ago. The marks were on the inner wall of the hollow, scratched into the wood with something sharp. In the dim light, they looked random at first. Just decay, just damage, just the natural breakdown of dead wood. But as my eyes adjusted, patterns emerged. Shapes that repeated, configurations that seemed deliberate. They look like her stone arrangements, I whispered, the patterns she used to make. Counting, maybe, or marking time. Tisa traced one of the shapes with her finger. What if she's been coming here for years, decades? What if this is where she... A sound cut her off, distant but distinct. 3 knocks, spaced evenly, coming from somewhere deeper in the forest. We froze. The silence that followed was absolute. No birdsong, no wind, no sound at all except our own ragged breathing. Then, very faintly, the smell grew stronger. We should go, I said. For once, Tisa didn't argue. We took the photograph and the barrette. We left everything else. We didn't speak again until we were back in the car with the doors locked and the engine running. She knows we were there, Tisa said as I pulled onto the gravel road. She heard us. She was watching. Maybe. What do we do now? I looked at my sister, my twin, my other half, the person who'd shared the most important secret of my life for 32 years. And I didn't have an answer. I don't know, I said. I don't know what we do with any of this. We drove home in silence. The photograph sat in Tisa's lap the whole way, those 2 young faces staring up at nothing, keeping their own secrets the way we'd kept ours. We've been recording for almost 5 hours now. The light outside Dory's window has shifted from afternoon gold to evening gray, and Tisa looks like she might collapse at any moment. Her skin has gone waxy, her hands trembling worse than when we started, but she won't let me turn off the recorder. Not yet. We have to decide, she says, what we want this to accomplish. I've been dreading this part. The argument we've been circling since 2019, since we found the photograph, since we understood that something out there had kept pieces of us the way we'd kept pieces of it. The world deserves to know. Tisa's voice is stronger than it should be, given how weak she looks. Something intelligent lives in those forests, something capable of memory, of connection, of, I don't know what to call it, attachment, affection, and it's been there for God knows how long, watching us, hiding from us, and we just keep pretending it doesn't exist. And what happens when the world knows? I can hear the fear in my own voice. Hunters come, researchers with tranquilizer guns and tracking collars, news crews trampling through the woods, drones flying over every acre of wilderness. They'll find her, Tisa, or whatever's left of her, and they'll document her, study her, prove she exists, destroy her. The word comes out harder than I intended. You know what happens to things humans discover? We capture them, cage them, dissect them when they die. Is that what you want for her, after everything? Tisa is quiet for a long moment. When she speaks again, her voice has lost some of its fire. I'm dying, Dory. I have weeks left, maybe days. She meets my eyes, and I see something there I haven't seen before. Not fear exactly, but a kind of desperate urgency. I spent my whole life keeping this secret. It cost me my marriage. It cost me my peace of mind, and I'm not going to die without someone knowing that what we experienced was real, that she was real. I know she was real. That's not enough. Tisa reaches across the coffee table and grabs my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. I need the world to know. I need validation. I need someone to look at our evidence and say, yes, you saw what you saw. You experienced what you experienced. You're not crazy. Is that so wrong? I don't answer. I don't know how to answer. Because she's not wrong. The need for validation, for someone else to believe, has been eating at me for 37 years too. But the fear of what that validation might cost is stronger. We don't have to decide right now, I finally say. Let's finish the recording. Let's get it all down, and then we can figure out what to do with it. Tisa nods slowly. She releases my hand and leans back in her chair, exhausted. I reach over and turn off the recorder. The red light blinks out and the room feels suddenly empty without it. Then I turn it back on. There's one more thing, I say. Something I haven't told you. Tisa looks at me, waiting. 3 days ago, I got a package. A return address. No postmark. It was just sitting in my mailbox when I got home from the grocery store. I reach into my pocket and pull out what was inside. I live 600 miles from the old homestead now, Tisa. I've lived here for 15 years. I open my hand. Sitting in my palm is a stone, smooth, gray, almost perfectly round, the same size and shape as the first gift on the stump 37 years ago. Tisa stares at it. Her face goes through something I can't read. Shock, fear, wonder, grief, all tangled together. She knows where I am, I whisper. She's always known, and she's still reaching out. The recorder hums quietly between us. Outside, the last light fades from the sky, and somewhere out there, in the deep woods, in the wild places, in the spaces between what we know and what we refuse to believe, something ancient and patient is waiting. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if this recording will ever be heard or if anyone will believe it if it is. I don't know if my sister will live long enough to see it matter, but I know this. The stone in my hand is real. The photograph in the shoebox is real, and whatever the aunt was, whatever she still is, she remembered us. After 37 years, she still remembers. I close my fingers around the stone and hold it tight. Tisa reaches over and puts her hand on mine, and we sit there together, two 61-year-old women holding a secret that doesn't belong to us anymore, waiting to see what the forest will do next.